Tim Burchett. He is from the state of Tennessee, the second district, and we can talk about what's happening down there today with regard to the hurricane. But first, let me just put into context, he's in the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, and Transportation and Infrastructure. I am so glad you're joining me today to talk about Kamala's America and what that would portend for Americans and for our nation and our future. So thank you for joining me, Congressman.
Thank you for having me, man.
Well, the question I've been asking is Kamala's America, what does this look like? I call it the nightmare scenarios. I haven't gotten anything upbeat. And many people have focused on the wide open border program, which is obviously intentional. They've talked about um, the economy, free speech, um, everything, Marxism. And so I take it that your chief concern is Marxism, communism, and any other form, Maoism, whatever form of socialism or communism you choose. Is that something that you find to be one of the greatest threats?
Yes, ma'am. Our national debt is our greatest threat, even more so than Russia or China, and by their lack of understanding, or maybe we're not giving them enough credit. Maybe their understanding of our economy. When Kamala Harris talks about the equalization in America and how that we need to make more of an equal, I guess, all of our assets equal. Yes, ma'am. Equity. I see that as that is a socialist Marxist type view where those that that don't produce, they get an equal share as those that do produce, or maybe that go out and risk it all every day, and they like to demonize the wealthy. They demonize capitalism as something evil, when in fact capitalism, in my opinion, outside of Christianity, is delivered more people out of despair than any other ideology. And that's just the type of, that's very American. You work hard, you succeed. You don't work, you don't succeed. Yet in Kamala Harris's society, if you don't work, you get the same as those that do work. So it's a real neutralizing, if you will, I believe, of America, and that is the America she sees. And it goes back to her father's Marxist teachings. That's what she was brought up under, and that's what she believes. And I think as you've seen, the spending under the Harris Biden administration has far exceeded the amount coming in. We had another $1 trillion every 100 days, and frankly, neither party has any plan to stop that or pay it back. But we are in the recent CR, continuing resolution, proves just that we passed. We are constitutionally required. The one thing Congress is constitutionally required to do is pass a dadgum budget. Yet in the last 30 years, we haven't done that, and and that feeds into the thought that Washington is a swamp. Well, honestly, a swamp is something that's pretty cool. It's a little ecosystem that God created. You have a lot of wildlife that feeds upon it. It filters water. It does a lot of things, puts water into the water
So
tank.
swamp is too nice a word.
Yes, ma'am. Washington, D.C. is an open sewer. It's created by man. There's no oxygen or no light that comes in. It's just a black hole that absorbs everything and is a putrid smell. And that's what basically is Washington, D.C. to this day. The latest CR was a continuation of poor spending policies that were bloated under COVID unnecessarily. That for Schumer, Schumer Pelosi spending levels, and that just does not work for this country.
Is there any way to get out of this era of no budgets and fiscal, insanity? I think
Yes, ma'am.
Americans sit back and we look at you guys, you men and women in Congress, we look at the White House and we say, how is this possible that this continues. In the last 3.5 years, how is it possible that there wasn't some great event where the borders were closed because isn't it illegal to be doing what the Biden-Harris White House has been doing, opening borders to anyone from around the world? It's a plan, but I don't know. Is this an actually constitutionally um, legal plan? And then to this continuing resolutions and not having a budget for 30 years. Why is this possible? And how do we stop it forever?
Well, the first thing we do is we restore normal spending policies back, and that's what's normal in Washington currently is spending, I guess, $1.25, $1.30 for every dollar you take in. But in Tennessee, for instance, our legislature, this is a policy we could enact, and it would stop this in its tracks. That we have single spending issue bills, whereas you don't have a 3,000-page spending bill. And all the big shots in Washington, men and women, both parties, when they pass these bloated bills, they'd have to get up and defend every single line in those spending. But currently, that's not the way it is. You have a 3,000-page bill. You read down to page 25 and find all your spending, all the lobbyists you promised degrees, and all your pork you need back in your district to get reelected, and then you stop and you say, I'm good with it. I'll vote for it. And that's what happens. If you had a single issue spending bills, they would have to defend it, and they couldn't. I can defend every bill I put forward. The spending in it is appropriate, but I'll guarantee you the spending in a lot of these bills is not needed. And that's how we get ourselves in trouble. And they cannot defend it, and that would stop it. And also, we got to have more than 15% of the population voting. I go back to my base, the evangelical Christians. 40 million of them across this country are registered or are eligible voters. And you'll have less than half of them that will get out and vote. And man, that's over 20 million people that don't vote. And that's who gave Biden Harris the White House. I don't want Donald Trump to teach my daughter's Sunday school class, but I do want his hand on the trigger when they're taking out terrorists like Soleimani and some of these others.
Agreed. I would have fist bumped you for that one subject spending bill. You're too far away. I've been agonizing over that for years, and this is what most Americans, either journalists or just the man on the street, says. How are they allowed to do this? Is there you would have to, I assume, have a Republican Senate, a Republican Congress, and essentially enough fiscally responsible non-leftists, both Republican and Democrats, to pass such a thing. That's like term limits or, anything that affects Congress and the way they want to work. That seems almost impossible to get past. Could Donald Trump basically hold a sword of Damocles or something over their head and say, I'm not approving of anything until you pass this at the beginning of my term?
He could, but would he? Because we got so many in both parties that enjoy the spending, they're just addicted to it. It's just looking for another vein to inject it in. And it keeps the powerful in power. So it's a very tough thing. I think if Trump gets in, he'll go through those alphabet agencies like Moses went through the Red Sea, to be honest with you. I used to say like Grant through Richmond, but that offended us all.
That offended too many people. Well, most of the Red Sea is very good. Let me take this back to Kamala. She's a Marxist. Tim Walz is a Marxist or Maoist, actually, as she may be. They both clearly have a subversive ideology that would eventually bring America to its knees and destroy anything that we have today and our future. What do you think Kamala Harris's first 100 days would look like? What would they do to establish power that cannot be undone?
I think they would shred the Constitution, much like you saw Nancy Pelosi tear up President Trump's speech. I think there would be executive orders. I think you would see a bloating of our federal government, and we don't have any reserves, but if we did, they would be expended almost immediately. I think you would see the capital gains on stock purchases and things like that removed. The capital gains, I mean, the tax, of course, it added, and so that they would be hit, and I think it would basically stifle our stock market. It would, I think you'd see people getting out of the market. You would see our economy slow down, if not collapse. And I believe that's what they want. And then they'd say, look what I think it is, but it's a controlled chaos. I mean, it would just be so out of control, but the results would be, I think you would understand what the results would be. And I believe that's what they want. And then with the media in bed with them so horribly, they would defend this much like they've defended Joe Biden, much like they're not asking where's Joe Biden right now. Early on, I don't know if you've ever followed any of my news, but early on, I called out Joe Biden for his mental capacity.
We knew 4 years ago, didn't we? During the
Yes,
during
ma'am.
the election, the campaign rather.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, he couldn't. He didn't have a cognizant thought. He couldn't complete a sentence. He shuffled his feet. All those things that we say. Look, my father. I remember when he had a massive stroke. He had some of the same mannerisms as Joe Biden does right now, and so we have the media has allowed that to happen, and
It's one of the greatest scandals. I call it dementia gate, but it's one of the greatest scandals in American history that we've been living 3.5, 4. Yeah, it really is. Well, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, do you consider them to be, well, do you consider Tim Walz to have his ties to communist China, the fact that apparently he has a clearance there, that China has paid for him to come so many times. He's now downgraded the number he claims he went, but it was at 30 for a long time. I think one of his former students says he's a committed Maoist. He's appointed people in Minnesota that have communist dictators on their walls of their home or offices. Everything.
Sounds like our State Department.
Yes, yes, because the State Department's 99% Democrat. And so do you think Tim Walz may, allegedly, whatever, to cover ourselves legally, but could he be an agent of some sort, perhaps an asset of communist China in America?
Well, I think the Chinese play the long ball. They've infiltrated our schools. I was told, I remember Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, I had breakfast with him, the group of us, about, I don't know, 3, maybe 4 years ago. I can't even remember now. It all runs together. But I remember him telling me the Chinese had infiltrated some areas down to the level of the PTA meetings. And, they play the long ball. I mean, look, we've got a member of Congress who had a relationship, and I'm throwing up the air quotes, with a known communist spy. You had a U.S. senator whose driver for 15 years was a known communist spy. You to think that's not outside of the realm of possibility, man. You've got people that are dedicated to overthrowing this government, and then you throw in the amount of people that are compromised in Congress, either through family or friends or whatever, have lucrative jobs, for no other reason than their boyfriend, husband, girlfriend, wife, whatever, is the United States congressman. And you have members traveling overseas, getting caught up in these so-called honeypots. It's within the realm of possibility. They play the long ball. They have so many people that eventually they're going to put somebody in a very strategic spot. that they've compromised or they've brought to their line of thinking. And there's a certain arrogance that goes with some of these far left people too. They're so arrogant how intelligent they are and how minuscule we are to them. It's really beyond belief, and it shows to me. I don't know why the rest of America doesn't pick it up on it, but it's to me it's a very scary proposition because they are. I mean, Kamala Harris is a horrible combination. She's not very smart, and she's very mean, and that you throw in the arrogance involved with that, and it's just and the fact that the media just backs her up. I mean, they're co-conspirators in this whole thing by not calling her out for her idiotic responses or lack of responses or inability to respond. I mean, at least Joe Biden, he's mentally not competent.
Do you think that I have a hopeful attitude? And the reason why I do, and I'd like to hear about your ideas here or your thoughts on this, is well, firstly, we know God's in control. So done and done.
Yes, ma'am.
But, and if he chooses to punish us by giving us a Harris Walls administration because we deserve to be chastised severely, then he will, and God's will be done. But I do believe that there's something happening here where Americans are waking up. It's become so flagrant, the onslaught. I mean, if you're on Twitter for 15 minutes, you've just seen 40 apocalyptic, horrifying, constitution destroying, evil things as you just flip through your feed. I think that social media and the people has played a great part in waking up people, Elon Musk and X. And I believe that there's this sort of separating of the wheat and the tares. The tares are so bad. I mean, Marxist, Maoist, communist, dictatorial autocrats, totalitarians are on one side, and there's the rest of us on the other side. That the division's so traumatic that it's God requiring us to make a decision. Shall I choose good or evil? And I think the people are going to put Donald Trump and J.D. Walls in office, and God forbid, serious enough election fraud that could be overturned. But I think miracle after miracle is showing that God's hands on this, but he's trying to wake us up. Am I wrong about that?
Well, no, you're not, and I worry about us going through the wilderness for 40 years. To elect a Ronald Reagan in this country, we have to elect a Jimmy Carter. We have to go through the suffering, and I hope we've suffered enough during these last 4 years. Because if we don't wake up, if preachers don't start preaching the gospel, if you and I aren't bold and defend our position on Twitter, on Facebook, and granted, a lot of these are bots. They're fake accounts just designed to say, "Oh, look at all these people that are against this. Maybe I'm wrong." The your mindset, and we have that problem. A lot of conservatives do too. Is that we want to be friends with people. We want people to agree with. We want people to like us. Let's worry about our country. Let's take bold stands. Let's do what we know is right in our heart. And currently, right now, we are not doing that. And if we're not careful, this race could be very close and we could lose our country.
I think it's over, essentially, that it would be that 40 years of wilderness. It could be 100. It could require like a complete disintegration of America before we were able to ever, regain by the Spirit of the Lord our nation again. But I don't know if you lose something as good as our constitutional republic, if you can rebuild that back. It just seems
Yes.
impossible. But I'm hopeful.
Uh,
I'm hopeful. And tonight, are you going to be watching that debate?
I have a theory about debates. You bring your side, I bring my side, and we both leave thinking we won. And also, they ask you to answer a question on a split second. And ma'am, nothing happens on a split second in Congress unless you're walking across the street and you decide, am I going to turn and listen to this protester screaming at me, telling me they're going to kill me, or am I going to walk? I mean, that's about the only, or am I going to get extra cheese on my pizza? That's the only split second decision you make in Congress. But And so I would warn people, but yeah, I might tune in for a little bit, but they mostly just depresses me.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but you know what? I really believe that the Lord is walking here. To me, his hand is on this because just in say, okay, I'll give you my Pharaoh analogy. I think that Harris was behaving like Pharaoh in the sense that when she chose Tim Walz, there was no worse choice that she could make, and yet she did it. How could any thinking human being think that he would be superior over the governor of Pennsylvania when it comes to winning the most important state in terms of the electoral college and his
Yes, ma'am.
demeanor at communist through and through? She could have gotten everything done.
Two
Yeah.
two things.
Yeah.
Two things. One, she's a communist. She needs somebody that thought like her. Two, her ego would not allow her to pick anybody that could outshine her. And
Yeah.
she achieved both of those goals with this guy.
She really did. But I'll tell you what, I still go back to my Exodus moment where she hardens her heart and God goes right in there and because that was crazy. I did want to hear what you think will happen if we had a
Yes, ma'am.
Kamala Harris, Tim Walz administration.
Can I say two things
I
before
want you to say
you go?
3 or 4 or 5, so please do.
That's okay. No, I was going to say, please pray for Israel under this situation. It's
Yes,
like there weren't any. There may be one death. We're not sure, but the it looks like that another miracle has occurred. And two, please pray for the people that have been affected by this horrible hurricane, East Tennessee. It's not necessarily I'm in the second district, but um, my my colleague just to the east of me, Diane Harshberger, first district, was hit hard. People lost everything. They lost their lives. There's still people that are missing. If you'll get on my X site and that tweet where I said that, I've linked to a couple of charities. Of course, the East Tennessee Foundation, which is a local group that has a very large outreach, and of course, Samaritan's Purse.
definitely.
That
I'll do that. And I did have, I'm going to just ask you for one more question. Um,
yes, ma'am.
I was thinking about the response of Biden Harris versus the response of Trump um, to the hurricane, the national
Yeah.
tragedy. And it reminded me of the idea that Marxists don't care about people. And to me, it just seemed that it epitomized all these tragedies that have occurred during this, I almost said reign, the administration of Biden Harris, that they don't care because wouldn't they have done so much more and wouldn't it have been personal and wouldn't you feel it like with Trump and his prayers and
Yeah, I remember when President Trump flew into Nashville and he said, and I'll imitate him. I'm not very good at it. He goes, Tim, we flew in there. We saw those blue tarps on top of those buildings. They were everything. Those people weren't waiting on us. And I was like, "You dadgum right, Mr. President. It's Tennessee, man. We ain't waiting on nobody. Country boy can't survive." And I said, but that's in America, our people aren't waiting on our government. And you're right. And she's going to make a big production, and I get it. And I'm not. I didn't go up there for the photo op. I think a lot of politicians get up there and they show them loading a box of food or something, and then they get in their car and go home. And they take a box of pizzas up to some hungry people that have lost everything, and tell them they're praying for them, and then they go back home, kind of thing. So I'm cautious about that. I do think, though, they could have shown more compassion in their speeches and just come out right then and said, "Hey, we got a problem. We're going to get there. Get to your churches. Get to your people that you know. Watch out for the fraud. Let's help these people. Let's do what Americans do best." And, and I think they missed a golden opportunity there just politically. I think North Carolina goes Trump now because of their inactivity. And I think they're just their complete blindness to the suffering of others, and that's because you're at such an elevated level. I'm going to be blunt here, but they get their butts kissed from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed, and they don't have anybody around them that says anything negative to them. I don't know if you noticed that Kamala Harris, she goes through employees. I mean, there's just the numbers she goes through. If anybody has anything contradictory or anything, they're gone. They
A
leave
really
or she
big
fires.
piece that I read that went through this. It was massive. And what they said is the employees were not allowed to look. This is back in California. In
Yeah,
her eyes, they had to look down and not meet her eyes unless they were elevated to a certain managerial staff level. And I thought that was shocking. They also had to stand up when she comes in the room and basically welcome the queen as she comes
yeah.
into the office in the morning. That's scary. And that's psycho. Well, God bless you and all of your colleagues down there and all the people. And I really do recommend that everybody go. I saw your very heartfelt request to send money instead of to campaigning, but to the people that needed it so much. And I'm sure very many people are going to do just that. Thank you for joining me, Congressman.
Thank you, ma'am.